was the summer of 2014, and for my son's bar mitzvah present, just like many Jewish parents, we wanted him to bond with the Holy Land. Oh, it worked perhaps too well. My husband had stayed back at the hotel, and our friends, my son and I, had just stopped in a pharmacy.
Run to the bomb shelter, sweetie. Please hurry. I didn't hear the sirens at first, but the Israelis did. They're used to hearing these things. We ran to the back of the storeroom. It was a 12-foot by 24-foot windowless bomb shelter. My heart's pounding. Boom! Boom! I hear it and feel the percussion of the exploding bombs. I'm trying not to get sick. I look at my 13-year-old son and I think I'll never forgive myself if something happens to him.
That's an excerpt from a speech I gave to the Orange County Jewish Bar Association. It was the first, but not the last time we had to run to a bomb shelter. Our adventure and my transformation is also the subject of my book, Blasted from Complacency, A Journey from Terror to Transformation in Israel. There is no chapter in a parenting book on what to do when a war starts and you're on a family vacation. Think touring extraordinary and sacred sites mixed with cowering in bomb shelters. I'm still trying to get over the Jewish guilt of taking my son to war for his bar mitzvah present. The impact of being human targets helped me understand the plight of Israelis living like this, and it also made me want to work on peace. How Israel is often described on the news is not what I'd seen with my own eyes. And I felt Palestinian parents also preferred their children playing safely in their backyards. The missiles exploded just near enough to blow apart my world as I knew it, forever changing me. And you'd never recognize my life today with what it was like then. I believe I found my life's purpose. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Peace with Penny. Wow, I can't believe we've already recorded 4 Peace with Penny episodes. For me, it's been a joy to speak with these angels on earth who devote their time and resources to making the world a better place. Please remember, if you missed any of the episodes, they are on my website at pennyst.com under podcasts. Today's interview is with Saskia Keeley. She is a Swiss photographer educated at Geneva University, Sotheby's, and the New Academy for Art Studies in London. She trained at the International Center for Photography in New York City and is a graduate of the Interspiritual Counseling Program. Saskia runs the Accompagnateur workshops, which are photography workshops in which participants unpack decades of fear and bias through the simple yet profound acts of looking and listening. She teaches these workshops working with NGOs like Roots, Tagir, and EcoPeace in the West Bank, and within divided communities, collaborating with NGOs like Pico Union Project in Los Angeles, the Women's Prison Association, Boys Hope, Girls Hope, and Friends of Island Academy in New York, STRONG, Youth on Long Island. The Accompagnateur workshops guide and teach participants to see members of different cultures and communities with clarity and compassion. Assigning each to take pictures of the other breaks barriers and provides the chance to literally see one another from a new perspective. Today, we'll be concentrating primarily on her project where she works with female Israeli settlers and Palestinian women in the West Bank. Thanks for joining us, Saskia. It's great to speak with you.
It's great to be with you, Penny.
Can you tell our audience about your photography and documentarian background?
So my work as a photographer and photojournalist started in the early 2010s. And for quite a few years, I documented NGOs. And so I would go on site to photograph their inspiring mission and vision. So I had the chance of going to India, to Africa, to Jordan, and I end up going to the West Bank. But this is a story that's about to be told.
Awesome. Yes, I can get lost in your story. It's so beautiful. How did you get into working on peace with Roots Shorshim Judah?
So meeting with Rabbi Hanan Schlesinger, who's the founder of Roots, really changed my life because we met in 2015 in Jaipur, India, during an NGO conference. And during our conversation, he mentioned that as very patriarchal societies on both sides, Roots had a very hard time bringing women to the center. And so there was very little chance for women from both sides to come together, to interact, and to see the humanity in each other. So Rabbi Hanan suggested that I facilitate photo workshops exclusively for women with Roots in Gush Etzion in the West Bank. So that meeting happened in 2015, and by the summer of 2016, he and I had really planned it well enough that in June 2016, I hosted 2 workshops back to back on the ground that brought together Israeli and Palestinian women.
Wow. What other projects do you do inside Israel and in other countries?
So that was really the first time. That was very much my first photo workshop. As I mentioned before, I was a documentarian before.
Mhm.
So it was just such a wonderful opportunity to kind of experience what's going on the ground, that even though I had never run a workshop before, I said yes to Rabbi Hanan. And the reason why that changed my life is that first summer was so transformative that I decided that I and Roots decided together that I would be returning every year from then on. And again, a story to be told later, but now this is all I'm doing, whether it's in the US or in the Middle East, is hosting those photo workshops. So to answer your question, Penny, in the meantime, I'm also working with 2 other organizations on the ground.
Mhm.
The Palestinian founder of Roots is now
Mhm.
running another initiative called Tahir, which is a non-violent Palestinian movement. So when Ali saw my work in 2016 with Roots, he asked me if I would be willing to work with him. In this case, it's different because I'm really only empowering Palestinian women. It's not a combination of putting together 2 divided parties together. It is really an opportunity to empower marginalized communities, which is what I'm doing in the US as well. So this is the other organization I'm working with. And the third one is called EcoPeace. And EcoPeace brings Israelis, Jordans, and Palestinians around the issues of climate and environment in the region, in the West Bank, very much around the Jordan River and the Dead Sea. And so I did a project fairly recently during the time of COVID, where online on a virtual workshop, they used the cameras that I have on the ground, and Palestinian, I would say a group of 14 young Palestinians documented what the Jordan River looks like these days, which is very littered, lots of garbage around. And so kind of this awareness that we need to keep, our resources clean and healthy for all of us to lead a better life.
It's interesting. I know but I had met both Rabbi Hanan and Ali in 2015 as well, here when they were on a speaking tour. And I guess wherever they go, our lives are not the same. They definitely speak our language, and they are phenomenal people that I hope you all will get to know eventually. I know the workshops have developed over time. How have you personally prepared for the interactions with the women to help, the fact that they, one speaks Hebrew, the other speaks Arabic. It must be difficult, but obviously with all of these workshops you've managed, how do you go about it?
So I was lucky enough, that built a little bit my confidence the first year, because Roots was already hosting a photo workshop for young people. And this was run by an American man, an American photographer. And so I knew that this, this contact, this connection could happen through the camera. I also had a feeling early on that, that was my first time running a workshop, that providing good cameras was going to be really important in that process. So I made sure through a fundraiser I did in New York that I would bring 20 high quality cameras, digital cameras, to the West Bank. And those cameras are now donated to Roots. And every year when I go back, I have the same cameras. And that was a really important aspect. And again, one that I see over and over in my workshop is handing over an expensive camera to your participant really conveys the message of trust and esteem and respect. I am giving you a very good camera that you're going to keep for 2 weeks in your home, and I trust that you will use it in a good manner and you will bring it back to me at the end. And it has proven that camera of that caliber really helps the participants keep motivation and engagement, in the workshop. So to go back to what you were saying, that was kind of an important aspect for me. I also really relied on Roots. Roots was the, they had to find for me the participants. I cannot, from New York City, and a population and, and a language I don't speak, come up with participants. So both on the Palestinian side and Israeli side, they were very involved in finding the participants for me. So in 2016, I had 2 workshops, and in each workshop, I had 14 participants. Each time 7 Israelis and 7 Palestinians, because it's very important that both groups be even in numbers, so that neither side feels overwhelmed or underrepresented. So that's also a big aspect of the logistics, just making sure that we have even numbers.
Yeah, I can imagine for the partnership and all that. So can you describe the classes, how long, how many weeks and hours, and just really what the setup is? You have these 2 strangers who are usually raised not to like each other. They live as neighbors, but they don't really speak to each other. The amount of psychological issues flying around the room must be incredible. How do you work with it? What's your procedure?
So to go back to your first question, and so the format of the workshop is 4 sessions, and those 4 sessions happen within a span of 2 weeks. So there's usually about 4 days between sessions. Again, we have to understand that for most of these women, this is their first opportunity of meeting the other. So we have to take that time, to just not overwhelm them by doing too much at one given time. And again, with that idea that the women keep the cameras during the duration of the program, that they also have enough time to get comfortable with the camera and to bring back enough relevant, beautiful, important material and photos from their home assignments, because that's a big part of connecting, is reviewing the images that they take in their homes, and again, witnessing the humanity on both sides and witnessing that from either side, these women love their children just as much from the Israeli as the Palestinians. So the first session, the session number 1, it's all about creating intimacy and comfort. These women do come with trepidation, even though it's safe to assume that these are willing participants, coming to the workshop, no one is forcing them. This still requires a huge amount of courage, to show up in a context that is so different from what their own communities are talking about over and over, the other side being the enemy. So
it seems more that it's not the fact of, the amongst their community, the fact that they are participating would present challenges to them. Have you heard of those?
So there are more challenges for Palestinians than for Israelis. Israeli will not be penalized for joining that workshop. At worst, their family members may be surprised, angry, judgmental of them joining. And I've heard this, I've heard Israeli participants coming and saying, oh, my friends are horrified that I'm joining this workshop. How can I mingle with Palestinians? How am I not afraid for my life? How these women may have a knife on them and they may stab me. So these are things that I do hear from the Israelis. From the Palestinians, they are dealing with a society and a community that really looks down on Palestinians meeting with Israelis. You know, the government is telling them that this is absolutely forbidden, and it's called the anti-normalization movement. So they're going very much against what their people are telling them to do. Therefore, I have huge admiration and respect for both sides. But you know,
Right.
these Palestinian women dealing with a patriarchal society and dealing with their own government showing up is incredibly bold.
Do you use an interpreter?
Yes, I do. Just like you said, Penny, before, we are dealing with language issues. So the Israeli women are obviously all fluent in Hebrew, but most of them speak English fluently. Quite a few actually are coming from Canada and the US, you know, quite a few years back are English speaking. And even the ones that are born in Israel have enough, you know, they all speak English well enough. Again, there is the exception every now and then. So what we do need is a translator for the Palestinians. None of the Palestinian participants speak English, or hardly any. So I always have an Israeli coordinator and a Palestinian coordinator and translator. And so everything that is being discussed in the group, starting with the first session, when we sit in a circle and we introduce ourselves and we tell a little bit more about our background, which is again a very important part of humanization. You know, this needs to be translated. And then also always a question that I ask in the first session is, why are you coming? You know, why are you doing this workshop? And they all speak, you know, there is the appeal of the camera that is not to be overlooked. You know, for many, it is really exciting to have a very good camera to work with. But there's no doubt that the main appeal is to meet the other.
The curiosity must be,
Yes.
apparently it's overwhelming for them to risk all these obstacles. So what do you do to get them more comfortable, and how does the class evolve? I know I've talked in detail with you about all of these sessions, and it's fascinating. So can you give us some more details of the different days and how you work through it with them?
Yes, so there's, you know, there's really an evolution during our 4 sessions. So in the first session, after we've done this circle of introducing ourselves, I then show them on my laptop that I'm using right now. I make a presentation of about 15 images from prior Roots workshops that really illustrate what makes a good photo, what is a good composition, what I am looking for when they have their cameras back home, of the kind of interactions that I would like them to come back with, you know. And again, these women will take amazing images, you know, of their loved ones, and in a context that I, as a photographer, would not be able to do. I'm a stranger in their homes. So after we've reviewed those images, what each camera is given, so each woman gets a camera, and I show them how to use their camera. For many of these women, especially on the Palestinian side, they've never held a real camera to their eye. They may have used their cell phones, but you know, a decent, high quality digital camera is very new for them. So just for them to already know how to use it, we stay in the first session on automatic, you know, the function automatic, and we just talk about how to make a good composition.
Heck, I don't think I've held probably the quality of camera that you offer these lucky women.
Well, you'll see in a few photos that we'll see at the end, you know, what kind of cameras they are, and they are very good cameras. So with this in mind, you know, once we've done this exercise, the sessions are 2.5 hours long. So by then we're talking about already 1 hour that's gone by. So then I pair them up, and usually in that first session, I decide who goes with whom, so that there's no discomfort of someone having to choose someone. So I will pair up each participant with someone from the other side. And with this in mind, they have, so Roots works from this compound that is owned by the Palestinian Abu Awad family, which is a small plot of land where they now have a couple of little buildings, you know, a few crops. And so there's enough space. It's not big, but there's enough space for, you know, 20, I would say between 8 and 10 pairs to go and find their own little nook, you know, so they can get to know each other a little bit better, and start to take portraits. So the assignment is, and the assignment will be in each class, because we can change partner in each class, take a really good portrait of the person you're working with. And again, that allows both of them to work the camera, and when they go home and I'm not around anymore, to know what to do with the camera. So during that time, they work, and I, as a facilitator, I will go from dyad to dyad to, see how they're doing, be a source of, again, of comfort for them, of support, of encouragement, giving them tips. So this is pretty much the first session. So then they come back and, we talk again. We talk about what the assignment is for the following week or the following, session. And Penny, what's really wonderful is to see the pride of these women when they leave the property. They've made it. They've made the first session. They're all kind of really relieved that it went well, because it always goes well.
And they have all their parts, and nobody's hurting.
Exactly right. Nobody's been stabbed.
Past the fear of all that,
Exactly.
not that it
So
would
I think,
happen, but it unfortunately, the reality there is hard for us who don't live that way, is incomprehensible. But that alone, the opportunity to be in a peaceful setting is fantastic.
Fantastic. And you see this. So you see these women kind of really surprised at how wonderful this was, and also so excited because they're about to leave and go home with their cameras. And especially the Palestinian women are really holding those pouches as they leave, just, really with this kind of straight back and great pride. And it's wonderful to see.
Fabulous. I just, first of all, you make me want to sign up for a session, but I would be pretty happy too, going home with a camera like that. Have you stayed in contact with any of these participants?
Many. So, I would say, let me make a quick calculation. I've had 138 participants so far in these workshops. So having done them 4 years in a row, obviously 2020 did not happen because of COVID, but I'm hoping to go back this summer. So I've had 138 participants, and I'm in touch, I would say, with about 20 or 25 of them. I connect with them regularly.
That's cool.
I will say that it's in general easier for me to connect with Israelis than it is with Palestinians, just because, the modality of email is something that they use a lot more than Palestinians. Palestinians will tend to communicate through WhatsApp. And there's less of a language barrier for me. And that really doesn't mean that I'm not as taken and close to my Palestinian participants as the workshops unfold. But in hindsight and behind, once it's over, I will be more in touch with Israeli participants than Palestinians.
Well, I mean, that kind of reminds me of the story that we've talked about, how when this all started, when you met Hanan, that you were really very pro-Palestinian. Can you talk a little bit about your personal evolution? Because, as we all know, that when we work on these things, we get changed as much as everybody else. So
absolutely. So you're right, Penny. I did share that with you, that, in 2015, before I met Rabbi Hanan, I've lived in New York for over 30 years. I'm a Swiss Protestant. I'm a liberal person. And for me, I'm really coming from a place of justice. And so for me, what I was reading and seeing was incredible human rights violation. And big blows to the Palestinians were being dealt day in, day out. So yes, I was really, my heart, and if I can say honestly, I was on the side of Palestinians. And so when I met Rabbi Hanan, this was my first time meeting a settler, and my first interaction with him came with some reluctance and trepidation on my part. And Rabbi Hanan was so inspiring in his mission, in his own journey, meeting the other, because that wasn't where he started 30 years ago. So just
to say, Rabbi Hanan is like an ultra Orthodox settler who lives in the West Bank, not someone that you would think would try to look at the situation fairly. But I do have to say, as you know, much as you were coming originally, perhaps for the Palestinians, I'm Jewish, you know, and I was in Israel, and I was running to bomb shelters. So I too have come over to both by my work in peace, if you will. It impacts your life in a very positive way and opens your eyes. So
I agree,
it's
Penny.
wonderful.
I agree, Penny. And again, you know,
Wonderful.
I mean, again, you know, if we can stay away from stereotypes
Yeah.
in the West Bank, in the world, you know, we would be all better off.
Yes. Yes. What kind of transformations have you seen during the class? Can you give some examples?
So many examples. First of all, I want to say that there's not a single woman, you know, and again, we're talking 138 women, which is not a huge number, but, you know, it's still substantial. I don't think there's a single woman who leaves this workshop not having been moved, changed, and willing to look at the lens in a different manner. You're talking in this case, you know, not the lens of the camera. The amazing stories that I have are quite a few, and I'm not going to tell that many. I think probably the most profound is two women, a Palestinian woman and an Israeli woman, who met in the photo workshop, who became close enough and convinced enough that this was really a worthwhile initiative, that after I left, they created at Roots a women's group. So this is by far, you know, kind of, again, you know, I'll never know how far the ripples of these workshops will go, but this is one, an obvious one. And I have another Israeli woman who I'm in touch with, who wrote me the most beautiful letter a few months after she finished the workshop, saying that she was still in touch with specific Palestinian participants, and that they have really connected, you know, and they speak regularly. And for her, it has opened up, you know, open up her heart and her vision as to what the reality of the other is. So just a couple examples, but there are many more.
Yeah, yeah. I think later you're going to show the picture of those two women who started the group.
Exactly right.
That I'm looking forward to that. And let's see, we talked about how this has changed you. Have you ever had any terrorist attacks impact any of your classes? I mean, unfortunately, those kinds of things do happen, and I'm wondering how that's handled.
So terrorist attacks happen every summer. You know, they happen not every summer. They happen all the time, and they have affected many groups. Actually, my very first workshop in 2016, when I arrived, a young girl had been stabbed in a settlement 3 days before, and Rabbi Hanan said, "I'm not sure you're going to be able to run a workshop," you know. And this was my first time arriving. You know, I made a commitment, and I was like, "This is unsettling."
This was an Israeli
an
girl,
Israeli who had been stabbed by a Palestinian.
Yeah.
Other instances is where the center is very close. It's about 100 yards away from a junction that has a checkpoint. So as the crow flies, and again, you hear the traffic there, you're literally right next to it. So attacks at this checkpoint happen regularly. And a couple of times we've had, you know, a Palestinian use a knife on a civilian, and then he's shot. And so these are stories, you know. Or there's a supermarket in the Gush Etzion Junction where both Israelis and Palestinians can go. There are aggressions, you know, happening there. So yes, there have been instances where an attack has taken place a couple hours before a workshop. And sometimes, you know, women are still able to make it, and sometimes the workshop has to be canceled because all the roads are blocked and there's no access. It will not stop the women from coming. That's their reality. So it's not a specific attack that will not make them come on a specific day. So it's more the practicality. We do talk about the conflict in the classes. We don't talk about it in the first or the second session. But in the third and fourth session, when these women are becoming more comfortable with each other, when they share photos of their lives, especially in the last session, we will actually really go deeper in each person's narrative. And so the stories on both sides will be told about, you know, the transgression from the other side towards their society.
I loved when we were talking and you told me, in the last class, the different, the women bringing their photographs that you print out. You have a printer there. Can you describe that? Because that just sounds like it's so powerful and such an amazing experience for them all to really get to know one another and hear about, what is it like for an Israeli? What is it like for a Palestinian? Because again, newspapers don't always have um, the most honest, straightforward experience that they're looking for drama, and unfortunately there is lots of drama, but the human being really, I think, comes out in those sessions. So can you talk a bit about that?
So yes, you're right, Penny. In session 2 and 3, we'll print on, I bring a little printer. So these are kind of small format prints that I print. But session 2 and 3, we will go through their home assignments and the photos they've taken. And then again, just for question of time and focus, each woman has to choose 1 to 2 photos that she wants to bring into the group. So we'll print those ones. And again, it's always very important, that notion of a circle, in a circle, everybody is equal. We all sitting together, it feels safe.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that photo, holding that photo, and again, that happens 2 sessions in a row, of that photo that is very meaningful for them, they will hold that photo and tell us why that photo is meaningful. So whether it's about their own children, whether it's about, the community, their shopping, their home environment, these photos just give us a glimpse as to what their reality and what their intimacy is like. I think you're referring to what we do in the 4th session. In the last session, by then I have so many beautiful portraits of each participant, because in all 4 sessions, they photograph each other. And I always, at the end of each class, download all the pictures in my laptop. So at the end of the 3rd session, I make sure that I choose a really, really beautiful image of each participant. And I have this printed at a Photoshop in a settlement. So I come back with large photo, they're about 8 by 12.
Oh, so beyond your printer. Oh,
Beyond my
wonderful.
printer, a much larger picture.
Uh-huh.
And the women don't know about this. So,
Oh, it's a surprise?
surprise.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
How cool.
So at the last session, after we finish kind of the final assignment, we sit again and I hand them each that portrait. And again, we have to understand that that portrait is taken by the other. Let's not forget that concept. They're going to go home with a beautiful portrait of themselves that is taken by the other.
Oh, wow. That that was one of those details. What you do is there's so many little thought processes that you've gone through, and the nuance, and it's just, I told you, okay, this is the first time I'm crying. This work just gets to me. So go on, sorry.
Thank you, Penny. Listen, I'm always moved when people are moved, and people should be moved. It is very beautiful. So these women are given the photos, and again, we're not going in a circle, whenever one feels ready, but I do ask that everyone speaks. I think that's, again, very important for the dynamic of the group. They hold their portraits, and we don't have those in the selection. I'll try to quickly find one because they're meaningful. And okay, they go through the narrative. They will tell, we've been together for 4 sessions. What is it that you want to tell this group? We're about to leave one another. It's very likely that you will not get to speak with one another for a long time. What is it you want to bring to the group? And Penny, the stories, range from really inspirational. Many of these women will just talk about their longing for peace and living side by side as neighbors, especially after those 4 sessions together. And some women will, again, feel safe enough to share the traumas that they are being dealt, in life. So Palestinians will speak, again, a story of one woman who spoke of her 18-year-old son. He's now 25, who was jailed for 2 years because he threw stones at Israelis. And since he came out of jail, he hasn't been able to find a job. He is, restless. He is upset. He's kind of hasn't been able to move beyond this. And an Israeli woman told the story of her uncle being killed by a Palestinian, and the fact that that she's coming to this workshop is a secret with her father, because her father would not be able to understand why she would want to do this. So we hear all those stories. What's so meaningful is, just like you were saying, Penny, so many of these women say, all we get to know and read and hear is about you, the other, being a terrorist, you, the other, being the occupier. And we're sitting here and we're seeing real people. We are seeing the humanity, and we are leaving having a better understanding of who you are. And, there's just more hearts and more compassion.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. That's one cry down. So, are you involved in other peace groups?
So I'm involved in peace groups in this country, surprisingly. So I'll just, make a little bit, a bit of a kind of, we'll go on the side and we'll come back to roots. But basically, as you were mentioning, Ali and Hanan come in the US, and, that's a way of them kind of spreading the message and funding their organization is by giving talks. So I was contacted by Pico Union Project that you mentioned at the beginning, Los Angeles. A wonderful man called Craig Taubman, who's the founder of Pico Union Project. And he said to me, and I quote him, "Saskia, if you can work with Israelis and Palestinians, you can come and work for me." And so he asked me, come, because I'm in this very poor neighborhood, Pico Union, where we're dealing with very different ethnic backgrounds that don't see eye to eye, which is a lot of violence. And he, through the synagogue, Pico Union Synagogue, that he purchased and has created as a center for peace and dialogue, is running all kinds of programs. So I did in 2017 a workshop bringing 4 different communities together in at Pico Union. And so talking about, peace movement, this is one.
So what groups were those? What?
So they were Muslims, Jewish, Africans, Christian, and Latinos from the area.
Wow, they have it all.
They have it all.
My
and
goodness.
It was very, very special. One of the Latino men showed us Boyle Heights, which is an area that is also strife with gang and violence. And he took us, the whole group there, and showed it through his eyes, through his lens. So again, a real appreciation, of again, what his reality is. And the other one I quickly mentioned, we're talking about peace projects, as one, you mispronounced it when you kind of give the letters. It's actually called Strong Youth, the project on Long Island.
Because it had the period, so I thought you spell it out.
That's how they spell it, but it's Strong Youth.
Okay.
And this is on Long Island, and we paired up middle-class white teenagers with MS-13 gang-related youth. And it was, again, 4 sessions where, with the camera, with conversation, these young people could see each other as not as threatening and as horrible as they witnessed the others. So just to give you a couple of examples.
Speaking of differences, when you work with men, is it a different atmosphere than with women?
So far, Penny, I've never had just a group of only men. So in the West Bank, I only work with women.
Right.
You're right. I'm working with young.
You work with prisons?
Yes,
right?
I'm working with young incarcerated, formerly incarcerated, mainly men. It happens that a couple times we've had young women in there as well. But you're right. And in this case, I would say 90 to 95% of the group is men, but there's always at least 1, if not 2 women. So I think, that's a question that's always asked of me when I present about my work with Roots is, do I feel like we move faster or beyond, can we move, how should I say, is it more organic to work with women in the West Bank? And I will say a resounding yes. I think, women come from the heart. They're less, again, talking about stereotype, I hate to do this, but
sorry.
they're less rational. They like kind of, I think if I were to work with men in the West Bank, it would be a much longer process. So working with women in the West Bank is really what I want to focus on, for the coming years. This is really my niche. This is really what I'm passionate about. But in the US,
I agree with you. Just for it's the age we grew up in, and seeing the development of the women's movement and all that. It just, I don't know. I think it's part of our age group that really wants to see women finally, please, advance and become equal. And these populations are particularly, unfortunately, behind in being liberated, if you will. And so it must be very exciting for you to at least chip away at it.
Exactly. And again, Penny, an opportunity for these women to have a voice,
Mm-hmm.
again, and I will talk about the Palestinian women, I mean, this chance of really, I think very often, they're not really given their voice and their place. So in that workshop, by presenting their photos and they do this with such pride, and they really come up with stories that are, they're also absolutely very loving. So, I need to say that in those workshops, even though there is a language barrier, there is so much laughter going on. These women will laugh together, they will hug each other.
Mm-hmm.
And the last session, we actually do a review of the best images that we've done throughout the workshop. So I will pull up again a slideshow of good images. It's important to say that I will always include every participant in that slideshow. That's, again, really important for the healing. And the storytelling that goes on, when they see, because I choose, unlike when they choose the photo that I print, in that last session, I go through all the photos and I choose the photos that move me the most. So new stories come out, and it's just, there is such connectedness, given a safe environment, these women really connect.
I think it's important, just because I know from talking to you that you talk about the first session you choose, but the other sessions they choose who they're going to work with. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because the growth that has to have taken place for the comfort level, to me, is astounding. It's absolutely incredible. So can you talk a little bit about that?
So I think, Penny, you just said the word comfort level. For me, the whole workshop is about comfort level. And that's why in the first session, I'm the one choosing, because I feel like if I'm giving them that chance at a time when they're just getting to, to meet each other, this is, again, a cause for anxiety. So
don't they even start out just able really, or being comfortable talking to their own people?
Yeah, and they do. And in general, again, when we sit in that circle all the way at the beginning, the women will sit with their own kin. So you've got one side of Israelis and one side of Palestinians. But the second and third and fourth session, there's one requirement, is that in each session, they have to choose a different partner. So even if they feel very drawn to one person, they will work with that person for sure for one session, but then they will need to explore someone else. So in the second session, they will choose their own partner. And it's, as I just said, they very quickly are drawn to someone. So it's so funny, because when I say, okay, now you can choose your partner, they're a little bit like kids. They'll jump up and kind of run to the person that they're interested in. And so, I obviously, again, make sure that everyone is partnered up. And there are times when the groups are not.
This is too. Go on. I have my Kleenex. Go ahead.
So, there are times when the groups are not completely even. So we may end up with, two women having to photograph another person. And that's fine. They're very flexible. Again, they realize, just back to the terrorist attack or any attacks, this is their reality. They know that, everything is, you have to, live in the moment and be flexible. So they're probably a lot more flexible than I am. I'm always going there as a Swiss New Yorker, with my plans and my kind of timing. And I'm learning to let go a lot by working with many different populations.
You're much warmer than that, than you're presenting yourself, but I get the picture. Go ahead.
So session 2, 3, and 4, yes, they choose their own person, And by the fourth session, by then they've really gotten comfortable with each other. And they've also really gotten to know how to use the cameras. So it is in that fourth session, before we regroup and talk about our portraits and a slideshow, it is so wonderful to see how brave and bold and creative they are with the camera, kind of really working from different angles, really kind of making the subject go this way and that way. So there's real comfort by the end of this, and beautiful photos.
Oh, amazing. I would imagine it even, I love words, I'm a writer, that, how you present things and how you talk about things, you've got occupied territory or West Bank or Judea and Samaria and all these things. It must be, something that you really have to concentrate on, your words that you choose. How does that impact your work?
So again, as everything that I say in English is translated in Arabic. So the translator will be able to use the word that makes the most sense, for that community to hear. Not being Jewish and coming from America, I will use the word West Bank. And I think people are comfortable with that. They know that this is the word. I will never use the word occupied territory because that's controversial. The West Bank is neutral enough. I will not use Judea Samaria because that's controversial.
Right.
So I, again, holding the truth of everybody and having that neutrality on my end is really important.
What have you learned by teaching your classes?
So much. So, we're laughing about flexibility, but yes, I've really learned to let go if on a personal level of, not having expectations and not, kind of not being rigid about, how the workshop should be run, kind of really living in that moment and holding the group and whatever is going on. But Penny, what I have learned is this in 2016, those 2 workshops were just going to be a moment in time for me. I was going to run these 2 workshops and then go back to my life as a photojournalist. And this has changed my life since 2016. I am not documenting NGOs anymore. I am facilitating workshops in the US, in the Middle East, and promoting this work and looking, for fellowships, for funders, for situations where I can be there offering the workshop, because I have seen in each and every workshop I have done in the last 5 years how transformative they are. It is not a single one that has not brought empowerment, peace, dialogue, some sort of real connection between participants. So I've learned a lot, and I'm so committed to this work that, as you said from my bio, I just finished a 3-year counseling program because I want to use those tools in the workshops. I want to just give these participants the best of me and the best of a workshop so that they can really do the greatest work in a short amount of time.
Yeah, the how this work changes us all, as as we've talked. I was a stay-at-home mom until, I had bombs coming at us, and, I took my son to war for his bar mitzvah present. That was not on the itinerary. So but the impact, it changes you as a person. There's got to be more than the ugliness, and it's a incredible ride. It's a journey that, if you're open to it, you can't predict, and the rewards are incredible. Speaking of, I know that you've gotten some awards for your work. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So actually, and you will see this, so I'll mention it, again, when we see those 2 photos, but I'm really, so again, another aspect of my work at this point, Penny, is, I'm realizing the humanity and the beauty of both sides. These women are as well. How about bringing those photos to the larger community so that they too can appreciate the humanity on both sides? Because, as you know, in the US and in Europe, people tend to really have sides. They really kind of believe fully that the Palestinians are right, and some people believe fully that the Israelis are right. So my idea is, again, we are building up archives and a photo library of incredible photos of these women, and showcasing, again, first of all, there's some photos that are just truly astounding in beauty, but just bringing the humanity of both sides. So I've had quite a few exhibitions of these photos, not mine, but theirs. So mainly in synagogues, in New York City at Bnei Jeshurun Synagogue, in Los Angeles, UCLA Hillel, and another synagogue called Atad Ariel in Los Angeles. But more importantly, I mean, I had a big exhibition at the Museum of Tolerance in the fall of 2019. And this exhibition is called Mutuality. And there were 14 pairs of images, one taken by an Israeli and one taken by a Palestinian, side by side, that kind of represents the same subject matter, seen from two sides. And so this is what I'm hoping to keep on doing.
That's
and
incredible.
To go back to the award, yes, I did get an award from Harvard for those two same photos that were at the Museum of Tolerance, as my participation in mediation and peace and conflict resolution. So I'm very, very happy and proud and honored to have gotten this.
Speaking in the classes, do the students feel like this is a respite from the conflict, that a safe place? Do you get that kind of feel that it's like a sigh of relief? At least, as they begin to learn what the class is about and what the atmosphere is like?
I'm not sure I would use the word sigh of relief. So, is it a safe haven for them? Yes. And again, back to this Israeli woman who told me that her friends thought that she was crazy and that she was going to be stabbed in one workshop, that feeling of, no, this is not happening because this is working. I'm really seeing this woman in all of her humanity, and she is not a terrorist and she's not going to attack me. We are talking about a place where the women feel very safe. Very often there are other people that are on the compound, other founders. There are often other activities happening at the same time. Another group will be given a lecture somewhere else. So there's a real sense of community in that place. And I think that's what people leave with is, oh my gosh, this is possible and this is safe.
What did you learn about yourself by doing these classes?
I learned about my passion. I learned about my passion to make this world a better place. I learned about how much I'm being nourished through the contact of these women, in this case, but any participant, how much my own growth in each, and I'm feeling like I'm nurturing these connections between people. I'm nurtured myself 10 times, tenfold from doing these workshops. I'm learning, like I said to you before, to let go of expectations. That's a big one for me. I'm coming with my best intentions with my program, but from there on, I'm open to see what's happening with the group and just go with what's going on. There have been sessions in Roots where suddenly we're missing half of the Palestinian women because something happened. They couldn't come because the car got stuck because of a checkpoint. And suddenly we have to work with a very different group, all of these things happen on a regular basis. So how do I rethink how this session is going to go? All of these are, I to learn to be spontaneous as well.
Okay, I've anxiously awaited you showing the pictures. I'll have a question after that, but show us some pictures, please.
I shall do this right now. Oops. Here we go. So here we have an image of my first year. So just again, this photo was taken during the 4th session. So what you're seeing here, the connection and the synergy does not happen right away. It takes 4 sessions for this to happen. So here you see these women. And again, what is so special, and I'll mention here, if you look at the two women on the right side, the young woman with the black hijab and the woman next to her who are holding each other. This is a sweet story. The Israeli woman is Rabbi Hanan's wife. And she was by far my most reluctant participant in all the workshops. In the first couple of sessions, she was having a really hard time connecting with Palestinians. It was very hard for her. You're seeing here what's happened. Within 4 sessions, she is smiling and she's hugging Jomana, who is one of the Palestinians that I'm still in touch with, a lovely young woman.
Good, you can't see me crying, haha.
And so here you see them again. This is Ayala and Jomana, and this is when there was a big shift for Ayala. It's exactly at that moment when she came running to me, asking for tips on how to best photograph Jomana's beautiful blue eyes. And it's from that moment on that there was a real, I mean, Ayala was a changed woman. So a really, really meaningful and powerful photo.
Wow.
Oops, sorry. Here you see, you know, that's actually interesting. Just back again to what we were saying before. Here you see two Israeli women in the mirror in the background. So in this case, we had a shortage of Palestinian women. And so they were both photographing this beautiful woman. But just again, this is a little bit of the context of the small space that we're working with, and just such a strong, strong picture that you have here of this beautiful. So this is the photo we were talking about before, Penny. So this is a picture of Havdalah, the end of Shabbat. And this participant photographed her husband and her grandson in that really beautiful moment of lighting the candle. And this is an image I have shown every year in that first session, when we kind of look at about 15 images of prior sessions so that they can see what I'm looking for that they document from their home life. So this photo was taken in 2017. I've shown it every year. And a couple years ago, a Palestinian woman came back the session after having seen this, between session 1 and 2. And she had taken in her home that image of her 2 children with a candle. There was a real conscious moment of duplicating what she had seen.
Can you move your mouse, the arrow?
Yes, sorry.
And
these 2 photos are the photos that these are the 2 photos that won the award at Harvard. When they heard that story, this is what got the, first of all, beautiful photos, but the story behind it moved Harvard and gave me the award. And these are the 2 photos that were the beginning of me looking for pairing so that I could do this exhibition of 14 pairs. And the exhibition is called Mutuality. So again, here you see 2 women, an Israeli and a Palestinian, and again, that connection that happens with the camera. So very often what happens, this is during session 1, by the way. So what happens is they will take a few pictures of the other and then quickly get back together and look together of what the other has taken in the viewfinder. So this, you know, this kind of getting close together physically really, again, allows for more connection, for laughter, and for collaboration. An absolutely beautiful image. Again, here you see.
Said they look like sisters.
Yes. Oh, you know, I say this so often. So many of them look alike. You know, so many. Often, you know, you would remove the hijab and you wouldn't know. You would remove the hijab and the makeup and you would have no idea where they're from. So again, another beautiful photo of, you know, an Israeli photographing a Palestinian. And again, for us to appreciate the courage and the willingness of these women to be the subject of a lens in a less than obvious context. So again, for me, you know, just talking about it, it gives me goosebumps. These women are bold, brave, and open. This is this is a moment in time, you know. This is not for the camera. These are 2 women meeting as women, you know, holding hands, walking together. Truly, truly powerful. And those moments, you know, you were asking me for stories, you know, there are beautiful stories at the end of it, but there are those very meaningful interactions that happen. Here you see them linking hands. And here, the same pair, she's rewrapping. As you can see here, she's got her scarf wrapped the way the settler women wear them, in the traditional women. And here you see her rewrapping it in the hijab manner. Really gorgeous, gorgeous image.
Wow.
So here you see the two women who met at the photo workshop and who have started their own women's group. So in the front, you have Nadine, a beautiful Palestinian woman. And Ori was actually my coordinator that year. And the first workshop, loved so much what she was saying. She begged me that if she could be a participant in the second one. And so she was juggling being both the coordinator and a participant, but she wanted to have that experience of really connecting with the others. So these two women are now running their own group. And this is it. I didn't want to show you too many photos. And
I don't think you could show me too many photos.
So I'm going to try to see how to stop sharing this.
Yes.
Oops. Stop share. Here we go.
You got it. Wonderful.
So,
okay. And so as your last question, if you were speaking to the people of the world, what would the message be that you'd want them to know about your work on peace and with this community?
So, again, Penny, I firmly believe in this statement, and I'm going to say that statement, is that you can't hate someone whose story you know. I believe that, if we use this, if we can connect as humans, if we can really hear each other's stories with or without a lens, then maybe this will be the solution to find commonality, understanding, and peace.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. That was so terrific, Saskia. I learned so much, and it's always great hearing about your projects. You're making such a positive impact on promoting peace in the world, and just thank you for that. I wanted to mention that we have some very interesting guests in the weeks ahead. Next week on March 2nd, Myron Joshua will be our guest at Peace with Penny. He's another Israeli settler who lives in the West Bank, and his work in supporting the local Palestinians will probably surprise and amaze you. I know it did me. To our listeners today and those listening to the recording later, I'd like to thank you, and may you live in peace, shalom, and salam.